Okay. I'm here to talk about the present and future seismic patrimony preservation tutorial. First, I would like to point out that most of the nuclear explosions and also many of the big earthquakes that we really need to know about to discriminate between natural hazards and man-originated events are still kept on analog records. So analog records are useful data. Even though this data was already processed at that time, was processed with the knowledge and the means and the purpose of that moment. And nowadays we may have different knowledge, of course, different means, and also different purposes. So we need to go back to the original analog data. And for that, the original analog data should be preserved. That's why the tutorial, we find it so interesting. In fact, some of this seismic patrimony, which is the scientific data, was a little piece of it was stored at Fabra Observatory, where I work in Barcelona, in Spain. Fabra Observatory is the typical old observatory, in this case from 1904, that stores still a lot of analog data in seismograms. With the best intentions, the staff had kept almost everything. But as you may see, a couple of decades ago, in the first photograph, you may see that it's not the best preservation state. In fact, for example, these seismograms roll up for more than 100 years. So when you wanted to see one of those seismograms, if you try to open it, you may even disintegrate them. So no useful record can you get from that nowadays for digitizing and analyzing the data it contains. So we really realized we had to improve our situation, and we started to look around what could we do. Of course, we went to a literature. For example, Tokyo has a great archive, very well maintained. Even nearer, in the central institution in Spain, in Toledo, they have very good work in the archive, and it's very well maintained. It's useful data preserved. But tiny, small institutions as ours cannot afford these huge investments. And that made us to explore in many other places. Thanks to the international community, especially to Tromos and Eurosismos, and the ENGB help, besides the Catalan institution, who always has helped us, we started to visit many other types of archives, especially the small ones, because the older records still are kept even more in the small institutions than in the bigger ones. And some of them were in the same or even worse situation that we were at that moment, but there were some others, like these two examples, Ebro and Almeria, they are two examples from Spain too, that the patrimony, the seismic patrimony, was very well preserved. And in fact, without almost no extra resource of funds. It's just that we discovered that there were some knowledge about some advices, hints, important points that really makes a huge difference. And we started to learn some of those points. And after some years and going slowly, step by step, we went from the previous situation to the present situation that I think is rather better and now allow us to have been doing work on inventories, scannings, and many projects that today I'm not here to talk about. I mean, today I'm not here to talk about the Barcelona case. I'm just presenting it because that learning from the international community encouraged us to take somehow the leadership in writing the first version of a tutorial that wants to help other institutions or other curators of archives with more or less means, but just to point out the most important points we learn. Not only the things what to do, but especially what not to do, because sometimes those few pieces of advice are really the huge difference to start. And we already have presented previous versions of this tutorial. We thought here in CTBTO was a good place to present it, but in fact, probably some of you already have seen it because it's a couple of years since the first version. Now we are closing probably the last version, and I'm just going to sum up to go to the last point. The tutorial doesn't want to teach exact methodologies of what to do with your seismic patrimony, but wants to give you the basic ideas to decide what is patrimony, what can you do with it, and not to be lost in the whole area to begin with. It has main constraints. Of course, we cannot do anything, and it has to be short, and it has to go focus to a very diverse audience, because sometimes you can find as curators librarians that they have no idea about the scientific content of the data, or scientists have no idea about how to keep the paper well preserved, not to lose it, or even sometimes managers that they only care about how to manage to get a contract or to get funds to do whatever they need. So we limited the tutorial by now only for paper seismograms, smoke, thermal, photographic, but always paper substract, and we keep it with this basic structure where the content is mainly in about 50 pages, organized in 5 chapters. First, identification of the seismic patrimony, to realize that not only the data, you need also metadata and additional information and knowledge to be able to process that data now or in the future, because maybe in the future we have further needs that we cannot even imagine now, and we need to preserve that knowledge and that metadata. How to do and how not to do inventories, catalogs, things that you really will need to start to do something with it, but that means that you have to touch and you have to move, and you really don't want to risk the comprehension and the order of the previous catalog. So it's better to point out some considerations before doing it. Then, of course, conservation and preservation, which is really what we are here for. I mean, we don't want to lose this patrimony, so we need to know a little of the basic common knowledge. Restoration, this chapter we almost don't include it, because in fact restoration should always be the last resource. You cannot go back from restoration. But finally we realized that even if you are not going to do it yourself, some archives really need some kind of restoration, and even if you are going to consider hiring or consulting professionals, you need basic knowledge about terminology and basic techniques, and that's only the basic pieces we have here in the tutorial. And finally, the most important chapter, in my opinion, is the 5th, the use and how to raise awareness for the seismic patrimony. Because if the seismic patrimony is not seen, it's just kept hidden, the things that are not seen are not used. The things that are not considered useful, they are in risk to be lost. So it's very important to be aware that really you need to give it some use. Of course, and use that don't risk the patrimony, but you have to give it use somehow. All the tutorial has been made trying to get very easy reading and very visual, pointing out the most important points of each chapter with as much text as possible, as checking list for being able to be hands-on with each part of the work, and with as many photographic examples as we may provide, some of them from Barcelona, but I'm very thankful to the international community that since the first release, you have been giving us some images and some corrections, ideas, and suggestions. We have tried to add them. And nowadays, we have the last version you can obtain by this QR link. And in case you go through it and you have any comments, suggestion, whatever, I'm really happy to revise it. Please do it as soon as possible because we are trying to close it to go for further works. But now, in the 2 minutes I have left, I just wanted, after presenting the work already done, to ask for your collaboration in the topics we have now. The next step now is especially dissemination strategies. The motive of the tutorial, the main goal, is to be useful to the international community, especially for those archives that they don't have the resources or the knowledge needed. So it has to arrive to them. If you have any idea for the dissemination strategies, if you may help in any areas to reach to some other places, please contact and let me know your ideas. The digital edition is already available and will be the last soon, but that's complete, freely available for always, that's clear. And now we would like to start to consider other similar works about the fields we have not included in this tutorial. Like, for example, the same, but without paper, analog seismograms, with microfilms, records on glass, magnetic tapes, digital data, or even the instruments themselves, because they need to be modeled, and to be modeled, they need to be preserved somehow. And all these areas, please, if you are interested in, contact us, and we will thankfully talk about it. And that's it. Thank you very much for your patience.
Thank you for that great start. This seems like a very practical and helpful guidebook. Do we have a quick question? If not from the audience, I would like to hear, is there any just example that you can give us of something that you changed in your observatory as a result?
Everything. We changed everything. For example, we have 1,000 of rolled seismograms from 1906, few days before the big one in San Francisco, to 1913, that they could not be opened. And we learned how to flatten them without risking and how to keep them. So not only now, but in 100, 200 years, we will be able to consult it. And probably this year or next year, we will finally scan them. That, at the beginning, I thought that was not possible because they disintegrated. But it's something that we really achieved it, and I'm very proud of it.
That's really inspiring. Great. All right, do you want to introduce Joseph?
Okay.
Thank you so much.